All right. Wow, that's loud. Hey, welcome. Awesome to see you all here. I can still see there's people coming in, so come on in. Hope everyone had a great lunch and you're caffeinated, ready for some code. We are going to spend a lot of time hands-on coding stuff here. We're going to have a really fun little session exploring full-stack web development in Java. Who here develops web applications? Okay, that's about 80% of you. That's great. Who considers themselves more of a backend person? Okay, that's the same 80%. Good. I jokingly like to say that Vaadin is sort of like the front-end framework for backend folks. So let's see how that works. My name is Marcus. I work as the VP of AI research at Vaadin. Today we're not going to look too much at AI. I have a different talk about that with Thomas tomorrow. So today we're just going to look at how we as Java developers can build really cool web applications in the language that we love, which is Java. So if you've been online recently, you've probably seen that there's a little bit of a pushback on the complexity of web development. People are saying it's becoming a little bit unnecessarily complex. Maybe we've made things more difficult for ourselves than they need to be. Can we make things simpler? And what this has kind of led to is that we're seeing more and more full-stack frameworks come in. In the front-end world, we have frameworks like Next.js or Remix, and of course in the Java sphere, we have Vaadin, which we're going to take a look at today. And I think really one of the key features of a full-stack framework is that they allow us to build higher quality software faster. And in my opinion, the reason we're able to do that is that having this ownership of what we're shipping gives us more autonomy to move faster. So first of all, we're improving communication. When we're communicating within our team with people we work with day to day, we're able to kind of get rid of all of those communication mishaps. I remember talking to one of our customers who's in the biotech field, and he said that not having to explain the complex domain that he's working on in the backend to a front-end developer on a different team, and then seeing what they build and then try to like reiterate this through a couple of weeks saves him so much time that it just that alone makes it worth doing it himself. But also, it's a lot less time waiting because we don't have to tell a different team that, hey, we need this new thing and please like get it on your backlog and tell us when it's done. And then when it's not really what you ended up needing, then you're doing all these workarounds. So having more autonomy to build the things that we need allow us to move faster. So what we at Vaadin give you is a full stack platform that includes all the pieces you need for building an application. So we give you a fairly opinionated stack containing the components, the front-end code, the communication layer, and the kind of topmost layer of your backend, all packaged into one package. And as we evolve things, we make sure that all of these pieces continue to work together seamlessly. Obviously, there is a trade-off here. So by using our more opinionated approach, we're optimizing for productivity. We want you to get stuff done quickly and in a way that you can maintain them. Of course, that gives you a little bit less control than if you were to kind of choose every single piece of your architecture separately and then essentially building that framework yourself. But I would say that for the most of us who are here building kind of boring business apps, as I like to call them, that's a fair trade-off, because rarely do we need to push the envelope of what the web is capable of doing. We need to build something that's cost-efficient to build, something that we can easily maintain for years and have fun doing it. And I think this kind of works out. So we did a little kind of survey among our users a couple of years ago, and 98% of them said that, yes, they are actually feeling more productive using Vaadin. On average, they said that they're saving about 45% of time compared to whatever they were using before, and that translates to almost 40% cost savings. So it's not just me saying this, it's actually our users as well. So what I want to do today is I want to give you a speed run of the theory. It's going to take about 2 to 3 minutes maybe. Then we're going to jump into code and see how all of this works, because I think code is the absolute best way of explaining how code works, instead of me just waving my hands up here. So in Vaadin Flow, everything is a component. So if you want a button, you instantiate a button in Java. If you want a date picker, you instantiate a date picker. If you need a grid, you instantiate a grid. So you can see we're not being very kind of imaginative with our naming here. We want everything to be exactly as you would expect it to be. Once you have those components, you can determine how they show up in your view by using layout. So if I used a vertical layout, for instance, everything would get laid out vertically. If I use a horizontal layout instead, things get laid out horizontally. And by combining these, I can make arbitrarily complex layouts. Obviously, these are just the kind of basic layouts. There are more fancy layouts that we have, but you'd be surprised how far you get by just combining these two. Then, whenever we have a component and we want to turn that into a view, we add a route annotation on it. So typically, a view is just a view layout component with a route annotation. So in this case, I'm giving my hello world view a route of hello. And you can see that that shows up in my browser as localhost 8080/hello. So that's pretty convenient. Then we can listen for events in order to add interactivity to our applications. So if we wanted to say hello to the person who wrote their name in the text field when they click the button, we add a click listener on the button, and then we add a paragraph saying hello to them. So those are kind of the most important things that we need to know. The rest we'll figure out as we code. Everything that we're looking at here is part of our Apache licensed open source product, so anything you see here, you can just try out. I will share the code after this, so pay more attention to the kind of ideas than to the actual code. So now that we have all these newfound powers, let us put them to good use and see what we can build. I'm going to start at Josh's second favorite place online, Start Spring.io. Who here does not know what this place is? Okay, good. I think he did a good job. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a Vaadin project. I think the easiest way for people, especially Spring developers, is to use the Spring initializer, add Vaadin. I'm going to build a full stack application, so I'm going to, in this case, just use Spring Data JPA and an in-memory database. And it is 2025, so by law, I'm required to cover AI in this talk. So we'll have OpenAI here. We're going to hit generate here. We're going to open up our project here. And in my case, I used Maven, so I'm just going to open the POM file in my IDE. Any IDE will work. I use IntelliJ. And what we have here is a standard Maven project using Spring Boot 3.5. We're using Spring AI 1. I'm going to update the Vaadin version here to 2480.alpha 8 because I like to live dangerously when I live code. All right, so we have that, and we have all the dependencies that we defined. And as with any Spring initializer project, there isn't anything in it. It's just the boilerplate and or just the dependencies, I should say. So in order for us to actually have something show up here, we need to add it here. So we're going to create a hello world view. And as you remember, everything is a component. So we're going to extend from a vertical layout. I'm going to add that route annotation. I'm going to say that this should just be at the context root, so the empty string. I'm going to create a constructor. And here I'm going to add a new component that will be an h1, so just a heading level 1. And we're going to say hello world. I've installed the free Vaadin plugin for IntelliJ, which has this debug with hot swap option. So if you launch the application with that, it's going to give you a super smooth development experience. So when you save your code, it's going to automatically reload that in your browser. So let's see what's going on here. Why is it not starting? Okay, so rookie mistake. I added OpenAI to my dependencies, but I did not specify its API key. So in my case, I have that in an environment variable that I'm going to add there, and then I'm going to try this again. So if this now works, what's going to happen is it's going to open our browser to that window. There we go. We can see hello world. And I'm going to try to get both of these next to each other. So with that hot swap enabled, I could change this to hello Coimbra, and hopefully that will automatically reload. So that's going to give us a super nice development experience. So let's just redo the example we had in the slides just to give you a better idea of how this actually works. So I'm going to create a name text field, so that's going to be just a new text field. Text field like that. And then we're going to have a button, which will be equal to a new button like this. And that's going to say, click me. Well, click me. There we go. Then we're going to add these to our view. So our view is extending for vertical layout. So if we add our name and button here, they're going to hopefully show up here. Okay, the button is a little invisible, so let's set the theme variant to primary. Maybe that shows up better. Yeah, there we go. Good. So what I want to show then is if we add this button, add click listener, like this, and then we have an event that we get. We can pull the value from there and add a new paragraph saying hello to whatever we get from there. Now, the reason I'm typing out the exact same code that we had in the slides is that I want to just show you what happens under the hood. So if I say Marcus here and hit click, it's going to show it up here. The first thing I usually get as a question when I show this to people is like, you're writing Java code, it's clearly running on the JVM, so if I put a breakpoint in the code, it's actually hitting in my IDE. So like, how is the code running in the JVM and also getting displayed in the browser? Now, that's a very good question. So one way we can look at how this actually works under the hood is I'm going to run Vaadin in a what we call production mode. So I'm going to do a spring boot run, p production, like that. So what this does is it creates a production optimized build, which turns off a lot of the debugging, so we have less noise as we're looking at what's actually happening under the hood. So once that runs, we can run the application, but let's open up the network tab. So when I go into an application, what happens is that I will get a Bootstrap web page. There will be essentially a little bit of JavaScript, which is a rendering engine, a thin client, if you will, and an initial kind of set of the UI. So once this is loaded, when we start interacting with our application like this, we can essentially see that what happens is that what's going back and forth between the client and the server is a set of kind of JSON instructions saying like, hey, add a new paragraph tag, set its text to hello Marcus. So what I wanted to convey with this is that the application is running on the JVM, and we're going to see very soon why that is incredibly powerful, and that when it's running on that JVM, that state is just getting rendered in the browser. All right, good. So now that we've gotten through the theory section of this, what we're going to do is we're going to build a small application. So what I want to build is our kind of traditional contact application, just so we can look at how do we build a CRUD, how do we do all the things that we are normally doing as we're building applications. So for that, I'm going to go into my IDE. I am going to remove the hello world view altogether, and I'm going to build myself an entity called contact. So I'm just going to annotate this with an entity. Then, of course, it's going to get mad because we don't have an ID, so we're going to give an ID, and we're going to have a generated value, and this is going to be a long, and then we're going to have a, let's do a first name, last name, email, phone number, good. Then we'll need an empty constructor because JPA. Then we need a whole bunch of getters and setters, and yeah, that looks good. All right, so we have a contact, then we need a repo. See, Tori, like that. And of course, that's not a class, it's an interface, like that. And it's going to extend from the base JPA repository, like that. Then we need a little bit of test data. So what I like to do is just do some demo data. Well, let's see if we can rename that, demo data. So I'm going to turn this into a Spring component, and I'm going to implement the app runner like that. Not an abstract class, implement methods. So with this, we're able to run some code whenever this app boots up. So I'm going to auto-wire in our contact repo. And what I want to do is just generate a bunch of people. So what I like to do is I'll just say, create 10 random realistic first and last names. So let's see if that works. Yep. Then use them to create 100 contacts and save them. Come on, there we go. Good. All right, so we have test data. Now that we have our backend done, I'm going to create that new view. So we're going to call this our contacts view, like this. And by now, we all know the pattern, so we're going to extend from a layout. So I'm going to do the vertical layout again. This is going to be our main layout, so it's just going to be mapped to the empty route. And again, here, we're going to auto-wire in the repo like this. So if I go and start this right now, we should have an empty view. And while that's starting, let's start building this out. So the first thing I want to do is just let's list all of those contacts that we created. Hopefully there should be 100 of them, and we want to be able to see them. So I'm going to turn off the sidebar there, and I'm going to create a new, our grid is equal to a new grid that displays contacts like this, and we're going to import that. We're going to set the items to whatever we get from the repository, and then we're going to add our grid to the layout. And that worked. So now we have all the people in our database listed in a nice grid. They're sortable and kind of useful. They're not in the order that I want, and I don't want to display the ID. So what I can do is I can define how the columns should be mapped by just calling set columns in whichever order I want those. So really where I'm trying to go with this is let's build a small CRUD. So I want to have a form where I can, whatever I select the user, I want to somehow be able to edit them in a form and kind of do all of that. So for that, I'm going to do a few things. First of all, I'm going to create a form as a new component. So a very common pattern working with Vaadin is that you create your own components as compositions of existing components. So let's create a class contact form, and that'll extend from a, let's use a form layout. So that's another layout we have in Vaadin. Final. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create fields for all the things that we're going to use. So first name, last name, email. Come on, you can do it. Okay, phone number. Then we're going to have a button, save button. Let's just call it save. Let's do a new button like that. And the mechanism we use for actually binding data to UI fields is called a binder. So I'm going to create a final, no, not button, but a binder. So a binder will take a type. In this case, we're binding to a contact. And specifically, I'm going to use a bean validation binder. So that's something that's going to allow us to actually reuse validation rules that we put on the contact. So let's add some just Jakarta standard validations. Let's say that first name, last name needs to be a given size, maybe like between 2 and 20, and then our email needs to be an email like that. So if we now build that and run, what I can do in my code is I can create a constructor, actually, yeah. And in here, I'm going to add all of those, first of all. Then I'm going to call binder.bindInstanceFields. Now this is a little bit of magic. What happens is that when we're saying to the binder to bind the instance fields, it's going to look at the instance. It's going to see that there's first name, last name, email, and so on. It's going to look at what we give it, and it's going to say, like, there's exactly the same fields here. And it's just going to bind those together. OK? And yeah, we don't want to have a set width there. What we do want is we need an API for setting the content. So essentially what we did just is we created a new Vaadin component that is called a contact form. It has an API, set contact, which will read in that. And then whenever we click the save button, we're going to save that to the repository. Good. All right. So let's refactor our code a little bit. I'll extract the grid into a field, and then I'm going to extract this into a method. We're going to call this refresh grid. We don't actually need to pass in the repo because it's already a field. And what we can do then is we can refresh the grid after we save. Good. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to create our form as a new form. I'm going to hide it by default, so I'm going to say set visible to false. And then for my grid, I'm going to say as a single select, let's add a value select listener. So a grid can be either multi or single select. In this case, we're only interested in selecting one. And we're going to get the value from the event, so which particular person was selected. And then we're going to set that to our form and either hide it or show it based on that. OK, so that was a fair amount of typing. And that doesn't work because I did the very most basic mistake you can do in Vaadin. So I created the form, but I never added it to my layout. So let's go ahead and do that. And hopefully that works now. So you can see that I can select people here. They are displayed in my form. I can hopefully change one of them, hit save, and they actually get saved to the database. If I refresh, they're still saved there, so they were actually persisted. So, I mean, we coded for maybe like 10 minutes. I think that's a fair amount of stuff we built. The actual like persistence layer, some demo data. We built a UI, CRUD, with validation, so you can actually see that those size validations and email validations that we defined are actually getting applied also in our UI. So I would say a fair amount of stuff we were able to do in not that much time. All right, so let's take a look at something else, just to kind of dig deeper. So of course, like few applications only have one view. Let's add another view and explore some other concepts. As you remember, we added OpenAI there, so we're going to add a AI view, and our AI view will also extend a vertical layout, and it will be mapped to a different route. So this one will be to, let's say, AI, like this. And here we're going to create a constructor where we inject the Spring AI chat client builder, and we're going to use that to create a client like this. If you're interested in learning more about Spring AI and some like practical patterns and how you can use it to build actual business applications, Thomas and I are doing a deep dive tomorrow morning, so you're very welcome to join us there. Then I'm going to create a UI. So my UI is essentially just going to be an input field and a place where we can display things. So let's create a input equal to a new message input. So we have a component that essentially just wraps a text field and a button and a submit listener, so super convenient. Then we're going to have the answer. Let's answer equal to a new markdown. So this is something that my team just contributed to the framework. That's why we're using the alpha. It makes this whole thing a lot easier because we can actually display markdown without needing to do any extra hoop jumping. So then, again, we're going to add these two to our layout, and in between, I'm going to hook up this input. So I'm going to say that add submit listener. So whenever we get a submit event, we want to do something. And what we want to do is, let's say, our response. Okay, and the API looks like this. So we use the client to do a new prompt. We're going to pass in a user message, which is equal to whatever the value from the submit event is. We're going to call the model with that value, and we're going to get the content that we get from there. So that's going to be just a plain string containing markdown. Then we're going to set the content of our answer to that. So let's see where we went wrong with this. Oh, yeah. Surprisingly difficult to type and speak at the same time. All right. Sort of good. It doesn't exactly look the way I want, so let's just do an input that set with full there. Make it look a little nicer. All right, so let's see if this works. Hello. Okay, it's taking a while. Come on. All right, hello, how can I assist you today? Tell me a random fact about Coimbra. Let's see how random it is. I don't know if it's very random. Anyway, one of the things that you may notice is that that took a while for it to generate. So if we asked it something like, write me a metal song about Java, this would start taking increasingly longer as it's generating more and more tokens for us, which is a good segue for us to actually look at a different way of doing this. So we could also stream those tokens as they're getting generated and see how Vaadin allows you to push content through a WebSocket connection. So there are a couple of things we need to do to make that happen. First of all, we add a push annotation on our application class. For this to get picked up, we need to implement a Vaadin app shell configurator like that. So that's all the configuration we need to enable a WebSocket-based push. And AI view, there we go. In addition to that, we are going to change how we're calling this. So instead of blocking and getting a string and then displaying that whole thing in one go, we're gonna do that one token at a time. So I'm gonna, first of all, get a reference to the Vaadin UI. So the UI is essentially the root of our Vaadin application. It's something we can use to synchronize access when we're updating the UI from an external thread. So that sounds a little bit complex, but it's fortunately not as bad as it sounds. So we're gonna get again our client, we're gonna do a prompt, we're gonna get the user prompt from the submit event value. Then we're gonna call stream instead of call, and we're gonna get the content, and that's going to be a flux, so we can subscribe to that. We get one token-ish at a time, and what we can do is we can call UI.access, and then we can, well, let's see if we can. What we can do then is we can append content to our markdown, so we're just gonna append whatever the newest token is to there, and there. Do we have too many or too few? Well, stupid thing. There? No? What am I missing? Semicolon. All right. So hopefully if this now worked, and obviously I need to start the server here. The reason I stopped that was I know that the hot swap doesn't pick up that push annotation. So we'll wait for that to get started. And then we can ask it to write me a metal song about Java. And as you can see now, it's actually pushing those tokens from the server to the client as they're getting generated. So obviously that's very useful for a use case like this where we're streaming things from an LLM, but where I see our customers using it is for building dashboards. Maybe they're monitoring the status of a system or inventory, or where vehicles are, or oil well capacities, or anything that's happening in the real world that needs to get displayed immediately is really easy to do like this. Okay, so good, we have two views. It's not super convenient that the user needs to know their URLs in order to kind of move back and forth. So let's take this one step further towards a real application and add a main layout to this. So we're going to call this our main layout. And we are going to extend a different layout again. We're going to extend from the app layout, and we're going to annotate this with a layout. So this is going to tell Vaadin that we want to wrap any other views with this. Again, we're going to create a constructor here, and we're going to create a couple of things. So first, we'll have a header, which will be just a new horizontal layout. We're going to set the header default alignment to baseline, and just hide the sidebar there so we have some more space to work with. So into my header, I will add two things. I'm going to call header.add, and then I'm going to add two things there. So I'm going to add a new drawer toggle. So that's going to be like a little toggle that allows us to hide and show the side menu. And then I'm going to add a new, let's do an H3 maybe. I know using header levels to control the font size is probably not the best accessibility thing, but we're going to do it anyway. So let's just say Vaadin heart Java, like that. We're going to add this to the nav bar. Then we're going to create some links so that people can navigate between them. So let's create a new thing called links. It will be a new vertical layout. And in here, we're going to add just two new router links. So we can say that we want one to the contacts view, and then we want one to our AI view like this. And this we will add to the add to drawer like that. We're going to save that, and boom, we now have a app layout here. We have a toggleable sidebar. It's responsive, so if we make our view smaller, it kind of automatically hides and shows, and we can navigate between them, and hopefully the app works exactly the same way as before. So I think that's already kind of a good start. I'm thinking we have quite a lot of time here, and we have Alina here, so maybe we should do a GraalVM build to see if it works, and if it doesn't, then sure, I can blame you. So by default, Vaadin apps do support GraalVM native compilation, and that's something that can be really cool. So for that, we're going to turn off our server, and then we're going to do Maven profile native, profile production, native compile. So hopefully what this does is it's going to create a native compiled version of this. It may fail due to unknown reasons, but hopefully not. I did try this beforehand and it did work, but of course I didn't have several hundred people watching me, so you never know. The cool thing about this is that we built an app entirely in Java. It's a pretty nifty looking app. It's fully featured, full stack, all Java, and hopefully now also running as a native image that we can easily and quite resource efficiently deploy wherever we want. So typically this will take anywhere from 30 seconds to just over a minute. That will feel a lot longer in a setting like this, and I know there is a Josh Long mode enabled that will play elevator music when this is happening. I haven't figured out how to actually enable that though. So you can see that this is taking a little while, and that's because if you remember Holly's talk from earlier today, we're moving a lot of that startup stuff into the kind of build phase. So if all went well now, in my target folder, I will have a native binary called demo, And if I start that, for some reason, the first time I started, it takes slightly longer. So it takes 0.12 seconds. And sure enough, it works. We don't have to blame Alina. It works very nice. Say something nice about Graal VM. All right, good. So the app works exactly the same way as it did before. It took a little bit longer to build, but in many cases, that might be perfectly fine for getting kind of additional runtime performance. Good. I'm going to hop back to our slides here and give you the QR code to this exact application that I updated in my GitHub. So if you're interested in just continuing on from where we left off and play, you can find it there. Obviously, we all built it together, and hopefully you kind of now have a sense of what's needed to build a Vaadin application. You go to Spring Initializer, you add Vaadin, and you add a view that extends from a layout, give it a route. Good. I'm going to wait for all the phones to go down, and then we are ready for some Q&A. The first time I did this talk, like a year ago, the AI assistants were not nearly as good. So that has now saved me 10 minutes of this talk. So if anyone wants to calculate how many % more efficient I am at coding, feel free to do that. But let's see if we have a microphone somewhere. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to take them. I'm also super happy, like throughout the day or days, if anyone does have a question and you see him in the hallway, just stop me, ask me questions. I'm always more than happy to answer. So please raise your hand if you have a question you would like to ask here, and I'm more than happy to jump into code and show you. We have a question up here. Do we have a microphone? We have a microphone coming your way. Oh, sorry, you got intercepted. But I saw you. We'll take you next.
Hello.
Hey.
Thank you so much for the tutorial. Can you show some custom CSS, like styling?
Yes, that's a good question. So can we make this look like something? We have a really cool demo about styling in our session tomorrow, so I'm not going to spoil that, but I'm going to show you how Vaadin is stylable. So at the core of Vaadin, we have a kind of a theme that's built on top of CSS custom properties. So they're CSS variables. So we have a light and a dark theme, and you can then start kind of customizing things. So we're in JNation, the color scheme is kind of like red-ish here maybe. So let's make that red. Let's make it slightly round maybe. And yeah, I don't know. So what that really turns into is just a little bit of CSS. So if I then go into my front-end folder here, I create a new file. Let's call it styles.css. Paste in that, boop. Then I go, let's go to my main layout. I'm going to do here a at CSS import dot style, styles.css. Like that. And of course now we are still running the native compiled version that doesn't have that, so let's clean that up and paste. So the idea is that by setting a few of these high-level CSS parameters, you can tweak the 80% look and feel. You can get the basic colors right, and the kind of roundness and shapes and fonts and everything. And after that, you can then apply just normal CSS to everything. So yeah, so you can see everything is now red and round the same way as we configured there. So I'm happy to show you more later on. Let's make sure we get the question we had up here covered as well. Thanks for the question, good one. Can we get the microphone down here?
Hello. First of all, great talk. I'm looking at your list of support technologies, and I can see you support Spring Boot 3 or later.
Yep.
And Java 17 or later. Do you plan on supporting other frameworks?
Everything you saw here, you can also use Quarkus for, so that is supported. You can run Vaadin even on just a plain servlet container. If you, for some reason, don't like Spring or Quarkus, you just want to do everything yourself, so that's fine. So I'd say probably 80% of our users are on Spring Boot, but it's not like a requirement as such. Good question.
Weird follow-up, but do your older versions support earlier Java versions, such as Java 8? Because I maintain some legacy systems, and this could be useful, and I can see you only support 17 or later now, of course.
Yes, we have, older versions certainly support older Java versions. So we made the jump to 17 at the same time as when Spring also upped their minimum Java requirements a couple of years ago. But certainly the older versions do support Java 8, but they are no longer kind of in active development.
They don't get security updates, right?
No, so that's kind of outside of the kind of free open source support. So certainly if you wanted to start with that and kind of get one of our like paid long-term support releases, that would be, but typically people wouldn't necessarily start on an old version. Good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, let's do one last question. Did you still have yours up here? No, you got yours. Okay, let's do this. Let's wrap it up. And like I said, I'm super happy to talk to anyone in the hallway. I know a lot of questions are very specific to your use case. You may want to open up your laptop and ask about them. So please do hit me up when you see me in the hallway. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for staying awake after lunch. I appreciate you. Thank you.